tonight, the topic really focuses on, for U.S.-Japan cyber collaboration, the challenges and opportunities that posed by, the growing competition and, rise as a technology power of China, both in the cyber area, but this in particular on this topic intersects with a number of other crucial issues for both countries in terms of trade, privacy, other digital issues. And it, is going to focus to some degree on the idea of the emergence of two technospheres and some work that I'll introduce coming from an organization where some of the people on the call tonight are involved, the Multilateral Cyber Action Committee. So I'm going to spend a bit of time introducing the MCAC, as we call it, and its purpose and the focus it's had on this issue. And then I'll introduce each of our two speakers. You will see that the session is being recorded, has been our norm. We're recording the prepared remarks of our two speakers tonight, and then we will transition to an open dialogue between all the participants. And that will not be recorded, and it'll be governed by Chatham House rules. I'll try to keep this fairly brief, but the Multilateral Cyber Action Committee formed early this year. Many, on the call, at least some on the call would know, this is really a follow-on to an effort that did exist, which involved some of the same people, called the Trilateral Cyber Committee, or Commission, I think they called it. It was led on the U.S. side by Admiral Blair, former DHS Secretary Chertoff, Art Coviello, and others. Included many of the participants from the Japanese side that we have on the call here, as well as participants in the UK, i.e. the trilateral nomenclature. But as we transitioned it to an effort led, I co-direct it with James Lewis at the Center for Strategic International Studies. Same leadership on the US and Japanese side, an increased involvement by European players and actually Israeli representation. We decided to focus the first efforts over the last 6 months or so on this notion of an emergence of two technospheres, the degree to which that is occurring, but tried to keep it scoped to the impacts on cybersecurity. I think we found that a bit of a challenging, proposition as we got into the work. We were, looking at, the fact that as China drives its own technological capabilities, starts to create, governance approaches, tries to set standards, creates the ability to operate within a technosphere, if we use that word, that is largely Chinese driven, and tries to expand the presence of that technosphere across the globe. It is not certainly solely a cybersecurity issue. It is highly intersected with issues of geopolitics, trade, privacy, data flows. So the committee worked at an analysis that was really trying to focus on the cybersecurity implications of that. And I think one of the things that we did that was fairly unique is always a dangerous word, but an aspect that we really dug deep on is looking at the impact on global companies and the challenges of operating across the technospheres. Both of, it was primarily examples we used were US companies operating in China, recognizing that the other technosphere, as I'll mention, the Western technosphere, we had quite a discussion about even the use of that word, is not a monolithic sphere and has participants, both governmental and private sector, that different perspectives on how to react to the Chinese technosphere. But that we try to look at the ability to operate across the technospheres by companies in the West and China. And we looked at and had people from Chinese companies that are operating in the US the challenges that they're facing. I'm not going to go over the findings of the report. It's being finalized. We expect that it'll be published probably in the CSIS will publish it in the January timeframe, and there'll be a launch event probably, of which everybody here would certainly be invited to. Some of the major sort of themes that are certainly clear in the work is that the presence of two distinguishable technospheres seems to be accelerating. There was much discussion about the fact that that is not necessarily a desirable outcome, though I think there's definitely differences of perspectives related to if you think that policy towards China should inherently be competitive, that leads one down a different road than one where you think that the opportunity for China to continue to be part of a global system that is based on common norms is present. So there was a lot of discussion, and as you'll see the report, a lot of effort to try to nuance the fact that while two technospheres may exist, that there's opportunities to keep the Chinese engaged, and that can be seen as a good element of this. Certainly across industries, very different experiences depending on the nature of the industries. We looked at primarily the automotive industry, the financial services industries, and in the technology industries. Very different impact depending on industry verticals, how the fact that there are two technospheres differently governed, differently regulated, impacts those industries. So again, the report will be out, but we thought for the session today in the dialogue here that it was a good opportunity to bring our experts, I'll introduce each of them in turn, to provide other perspectives on this of the emergence of China, the nature of what it's doing, the technology approaches that it's taken, where they compete with the US and the Japanese, particularly in the cybersecurity area. So why don't we turn to each of our speakers? We're going to begin this evening with Hideaki Watanabe, who's an advisor to the Defense Technology Foundation and a former commissioner for acquisition technology and logistics agency in the Ministry of Defense. He is also a member of the MCAC and participating in the work. He has a prepared presentation. So Watanabe-san, over to you.
Well, thank you. Good evening and good morning. And I'm going to talk about security technology cooperation. And recently, the difference between military and civil technologies has been broad. This is a global trend. Therefore, dual-use technologies have become more important than ever. In 2014, the US set up the third offset strategy to incorporate advanced commercial technologies into military systems. And they set up the Defense Innovation Unit in Silicon Valley to attract innovative commercial companies to work with DoD. As for China, China set up the military civil fusion policy to strengthen technologies needed for both the military and civil sector. And Japan, ATRA, as a former my organization, Acquisition Technology and Logistics Agency, set up the defense technology strategy to introduce advanced technology, which are deeply related to dual-use technologies. Today, I'd like to talk about 4 cases for potential collaboration examples. Case 1, 5G and O-RAN, and case 2, post-quantum computer encryption. Then space cybersecurity, and case 4, last one is international R&D collaboration. In the first case, 5G and O-RAN, Chinese hegemony in 5G networks is considered to pose a major threat to global security. If China plays a dominant role in global 5G networks, there could be a grave concern that the security of the world networks could possibly be compromised. Japan decided to exclude Huawei and ZTE from government procurement in 2018, and infrastructure companies such as NTT, KDDI, and SoftBank followed suit. ORAN, which stands for Open Radio Access Network, has been attracting attention recently as an alternative to Huawei. ORAN is an initiative launched mainly by AT&T, Deutsche Telekom, and NTT to develop an open and widely acceptable specification of 5G radio access network. By excluding Huawei, Japanese companies, including NEC, Fujitsu, and NTT, can participate in ORAN so that they are able to actively work on 5G projects inside and outside Japan. The left-hand side picture shows ORAN characteristics. And the main feature is multi-vendor. The right-hand side picture shows the NTT Docomo's ORAN Alliance. The Japanese company NEC, Fujitsu, and NTT Data are collaborating with US companies to construct telecom infrastructure. Second case is post-quantum computer encryption. Quite a few scientists and engineers predict that quantum computers will be able to crack current encryption systems within 5 to 10 years. There are two types of next generation candidate encryptions. One is quantum key distribution, QKD, which is based on quantum physics. And the other one is post-quantum cryptography, PQC, and it is based on mathematics. China has recently been leading in QKD research through testing large-scale experiments using its quantum satellite called Misuse. As shown by this picture, it is said that quantum satellite Misuse successfully connected Vienna, Australia, and Beijing, China, via secure QKD quantum communication. Then China's research team was highly evaluated by the American Physical Academy and awarded the 2018 Newcomb Cleveland Prize. However, regarding critical infrastructure, the governments of the US, the UK, and France expressed that QKD is not practical and has instead adopted PQC as their solution to post-quantum computer encryption. With respect to this decision, the majority of Japanese cryptographic engineers consider that QKD still has great potential for future secure communication. So the Japanese government surely understands that PQC is currently the best solution. But in preparation for the future, the government recently decided to invest $130 million to accelerate its QKD research by using satellite constellation. And a government-funded Japanese research team has been collaborating with Western partners to develop, mostly Western companies, to develop future secure quantum communication independently from China. As a result, I believe that this team will greatly contribute to the Western technosphere. The next one, third case, is cybersecurity in space. Space utilization has recently been booming in the private sector. Quite a few companies, mainly in the United States, have rapidly increased their interest in space. Mega constellation is keyword. Mega constellation has recently become a center of interest in both the military and commercial sector, including SpaceX, Starlink, and Amazon. As shown by this picture, SpaceX Starlink is going to implement space-based internet, and they will launch 42,000 satellites into low Earth orbit. Cyber attacks, especially in space, have more dangerous properties which are not found in those of cyber attacks on other infrastructures. According to US media, several experts warned that if a satellite were hacked, it would not only stop functioning, but could also fall under control of hackers, hijacked by hackers. And the satellite could be made into a kinetic weapon in the worst case scenario. The establishment of standards to manage cybersecurity in space is an urgent issue. Western technosphere countries should share information on the risks on the space cybersecurity risks and discuss concrete measures to mitigate these risks. The case for international R&D collaboration. Yes, the current Defense Minister of Japan, Nobuo Kishi, said to the US media in 2020 that joint research and development between like-minded countries is very important. And in 2020 also, US DoD document, the International Science and Technology Engagement Strategy, encouraged like-minded countries' military technology collaborations, especially considering the remarkable advances in military science and technology in China. And taking into consideration of importance of dual-use technologies, I believe that it is necessary for Western technosphere countries to get together to develop innovative dual-use technologies such as AI, quantum technology, and advanced semiconductor technology to strengthen the military as well as the economy. In conclusion, I'd like to add two more items. As for supply chain issues and tech standard, Western technosphere countries should cooperate to construct a self-reliant supply chain and tech standards for infrastructure, including space inside Western technosphere. It is necessary also for military systems, so again, infrastructure and other national security related systems. And the last one is a concerning bridge between two tech spheres. In this case, the two technospheres could communicate with each other through exchanging views about the future technology of interest, especially when they are in the stage of science. Thank you for your listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Watanabe-san. As we transition to the next speaker, a couple things to remind everybody, the projected time frame for the session today is about 75 minutes. We're about 20 plus into that. So, what we do and what has always been pretty active, as hopefully most know, is just start to queue up questions. So if you've got things that you would like to ask either of the speakers or discuss with others on the call, put those in the chat room or raise hands, and I will moderate the discussion after Adam Segal speaks to us next. Adam is the Ira Lipman Chair for Emerging Technologies and National Security and Director of the Digital and Cyberspace Policy Program at the Council of Foreign Relations. Adam has led, published, driven a lot of the activity out of the Council on Foreign Relations and in the think tank community writ large. He's also adjunct professor at Columbia School of International and Public Affairs, where he teaches a course on East Asian cyber security, and a longtime collaborator. I did want to mention, Adam, hello from Benjamin Ang here in Singapore. I had a conversation with him this afternoon and told him I would be seeing you tonight. So he told me to tell you hi. So with that, Adam, over to you.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Greg. Look forward to the discussion today. So what I'm going to do is, in part, question the idea of a technosphere, even though I've written a great deal about the coming cold tech war between the US and China. I think the the idea of technology alliances is an important one, but they are going to be extremely difficult to create. In part because we are not going to have two separate tech spheres. The US and China are not in competition over two separate spaces. They are in competition over ever-changing networks. So we have an image of decoupling as being kind of two trains that are then separated, decoupled from each other. But in fact, decoupling is going to be more like surgery, removing, some tumor deep in the body where you have to make sure that you get all the nerves and muscles and everything separate before you take anything out. And so I think 3 points make that kind of question our idea of a tech sphere as opposed to ever-changing networks. And the first is we have to assume that most policymakers really have no idea of the complexity of supply chains, right? They fundamentally do not understand how complex supply chains are. And you can take just one example from a study done by McKinsey about Dell and Lenovo, so a US based company and a Chinese company. The two of them have between 4,000 and 5,000 tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers. So companies that provide into their supply chain. Of those 4,000 to 5,000, 2,000 of them are in common, right? So it's not as if they have two separate supply chains, but almost more than half, close to half, are exactly in common. And this is not just true for a product that's very commodified like PCs. It's true in some of the areas that were emerging technologies that are we're competing over, things like lithium-ion batteries, semiconductors, sophisticated displays. If you look at the supply chains between Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, US, and China, extremely, extremely complicated. Second, there are actually few countries that want to be part of a bloc. And once you take away not China or kind of competing with China, there's not much that holds them together. Two great examples of countries that don't really want to be a bloc. South Korea, right? A US ally, helping with the US on 5G. Samsung is an important supplier there. Works with the US on the norms of cybersecurity, talks about the importance of those norms. But South Korea has kept the Quad at arm's length. It's not particularly interested in that relationship, and sees China as an extremely important market for semiconductors. And you may have seen last week there was an article in the FT about SK Hynix wanting to expand its semiconductor plant inside of in China. A second example would be India, which of course is a participant in the Quad. But India is one of the world's leaders on internet shutdowns, so not holding into a norm that we particularly support, is actively engaged in data localization, is trying to develop its own 5G, which it calls 5GI, and then also would like to have alternatives to US platforms. So again, you may have seen, there's an article maybe 2 weeks ago in the Times about all the pressure that India has put on Twitter because Twitter has been taking down inflammatory comment from the BJP. And what that's done is driven Indian users to a Twitter alternative called Coup. So there are actually very few countries that want to be part of a bloc, and even countries that we see as being close potential allies and friends want to shift back and forth. Third, China is working very hard to show that alliances or a tech sphere is going to be bad, right? That it is going to hurt innovation, that it wants to have no part of creating blocks, and it is trying to be open. Now, most of this, of course, is rhetoric and propaganda, but it is an important framing competing with what the US is saying about democracy alliances and other things. You can see this in Xi Jinping's speech to the G20 in November of 2021, where he highlighted China's support for an open, fair, just, and non-discriminatory environment for digital development. He announced that China would be joining the Digital Economy Partnership Agreement. and then made a swipe at technology alliances, warning that exclusive blocks will only create divisions and slow innovation and technological discovery down. All right, so given that, I think these tech spheres are going to be ever changing and moving depending upon the technology and the players. Let me just end with what I think 3 principles are for US-Japan cooperation, which is kind of easier to lay out than to implement. The first is that the US and Japan have to get the balance between kind of hard security goals and the larger shaping goals right. So from a kind of cybersecurity perspective, there are probably a set of things we want to do to keep the 2 systems or keep 2 networks separate and harden US systems and Japanese systems. But at the same time, we want to be shaping the flow of technology in the Indo-Pacific and ASEAN in particular, which is going to require more openness and more flow. So how do you get that balance between hard security goals and shaping right? Second, the goal when we think about these supply chains is not self-reliance, right? Self-reliance is going to be almost impossible. And so the goal really is redundancy, which means not only inside specific countries, but across countries, so that you don't get any one supply chain potentially dominated by adversaries. And then third, the goal is that the supply chain itself contains enough expertise that it can innovate faster than the adversaries' supply chains. Again, this doesn't require that everything is located inside one country. Indigenization, it should be spread. And so many of the ideas that Watanabe-san discussed about cooperation means that you have to spread a lot of the R&D and manufacturing among those chains. I'll stop there, Greg, with those kind of 3 broad points.